Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. What type of show are we calling this, Emily? What is this?
This is Breaking Democracy.
Breaking Democracy.
That's right.
That's right.
Sometimes it's fascist points.
Fascist points. I would say, yeah, Breaking Democracy because we've given up on democracy, right? That's.
Oh,
I'm just joking. No. It's okay. No more quiet parts out loud. It's Happy Wednesday. Not used to saying that. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh,
and
hello.
To Ryan for switching in. We got some childcare problems at home, but everything seems to be working out right now. All right, let's see. What do we have today on the show? Who usually sets this up? Is it Ryan or you? Who talks about the topics?
It's how the Spirit moves us. We just flow with it. Nobody really knows. It's okay. Don't worry
See, Crystal
about
and I
it.
are much more regimented.
You totally are. You totally are.
Okay, all right. Well, why don't I do the first three and then you do the other three in the spirit of the show. We're going to talk about the economy and the new BLS, the new Bureau of Labor Statistics, has a new proposed commissioner who's got some interesting changes, and we're going to check in on inflation. We're also going to talk about a fascinating, in some ways, new deal between Donald Trump and NVIDIA and AMD, those chip-making companies here in the United States, a crazy precedent that's being set there, and also kind of what it tells us about AI. It's a good segue to talking about employment, and basically youth unemployment and or underemployment is going sky high here. There's a lot of AI indications in the overall job market. Obviously, we want to check in on that. Youth unemployment, not usually a good sign politically. And then we are going to have, what is his name? Delano Squires. He's going to be here in the studio. This is a friend of Emily's, and he's going to talk to us a little bit more. He's more of a conservative guest, but he's going to talk to us. He's somebody who knows quite a bit about DC crime, and he's going to tell us what he thinks about the Trump administration takeover here of MPD.
Yeah, of course. And speaking of which, actually, Donald Trump is reconsidering, or he is considering a reclassification of marijuana. So our co-host here, Stephen A. Smith, has lots of thoughts on that.
One of Stephen's best takes, perhaps his only good take, as some people say.
We're going to get into what's actually on the table and what it might mean. Donald Trump, I actually meant to say Tucker Carlson had a nun on his program who testified to the conditions that Christians experience in the Middle East more broadly, but also particularly in the West Bank. And she spoke a bit to Gaza as well. So we're going to do a breakdown of some of the comments that were shared on Tucker's show and what it could mean if people in the administration are watching it. Saagar may have thoughts on that for sure. And Andrew Cuomo in the Epstein files, that's not a surprise to anyone, but Zohran Mamdani is now going after him hard for being in the Epstein files. So we have a fascinating Zohran ad to get to, and a little bit of news on the Maxwell transcript front to get to as well. So Saagar, let's start with that new inflation report that the White House was commenting on yesterday.
Let's get to it. And then it also includes this Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner. Oh, I forgot to say, by the way, breakingpoints.com. If you are able to help us out, monthly, yearly memberships, you can go ahead and sign up. And if you can't, no worries, just go ahead and subscribe button on YouTube. If you're listening on a podcast, just go ahead and send this episode or any of your favorite episodes to a friend. So with the BLS data, we now have a response here from the White House after Trump fired the Bureau of Labor Statistics Commissioner. Basically, remember, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, their job is to compile all of the employment data. It is, however, very inaccurate, kind of has been over the last 5 years. There's a lot of complicated reasons that Crystal and I got into the last time that we covered it. But with the new commissioner, they're actually proposing just doing away with the monthly jobs report entirely. Here's what the White House had to say.
If the jobs data is not reliable, should Americans trust the inflation data?
Well, look, the jobs data has had massive revisions. We want to ensure that all of the data, the inflation data, the jobs data, any data point that is coming out of the BLS is trustworthy and is accurate, which is why the president has restored new leadership at the BLS.
Trustworthy and accurate. And this is apparently the new justification. Let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen from the Wall Street Journal. This was after the appointment of E.J. Antoni. He's now the chief. He was previously the chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. He has been a longtime critic of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But for our purposes, Emily, what he has proposed is doing away with the monthly jobs report entirely. And just to give, I guess, I don't know if there's both sides sides of this, but I will, at the very least, like try to. What they are saying is that because the monthly jobs reports have been so inaccurate that they have proposed doing away with it entirely. Quote, in an interview on Fox News Digital on Monday ahead of his nomination, E.J. Antoni criticized the monthly employment report as flawed, suggested it be replaced, quote, with a more accurate, though less timely quarterly data. Now, the thing is that monthly report is very closely watched by economists, by the stock market. It's, I mean, obviously, even last time, it's been known to move markets previously. And so the doing away with it, and actually the way that they compile it, would become a major point of scrutiny for kind of checking in on the economy. You know, the inflation numbers and the jobs numbers are two of the only measures that we really do have as to how things are going in real time. As I said last time around, look, the idea that you're going to get a critical snapshot of what's actually happened in a month is preposterous, especially since COVID. We've had response rates decline, the sampling. There's so many different problems with the way that they do it. But it's much more of actually of a technical problem. And by the way, DOGE fired the entire team who was trying to update the system in their very first week in office under Howard Lutnick. But so yeah, that's where things are. I mean, the main problem is that now they're kind of sowing, quote, distrust, in the numbers. And whatever these new quarterly numbers are, what they're going to have to do is prove their work and actually do this competently. Do I have full confidence that that's going to happen? No, I do not. But I'm curious what you think.
I'm shocked to hear this. So let's put this next element on the screen. This is Joe Weisenthal's reaction. So to get a flavor of how people are reacting in Wall Street world, he wrote basically, a lot of people would agree that the BLS does need to be shaken up in some way due to the increased cost of collecting data. And he says, thanks to inflation as well as lower response rates to surveys and so on, as Saagar just mentioned, they're strains in the production of high-quality economic data, and having high-quality, trustworthy data is really important. But at this point, hoping that the new BLS chief will credibly modernize economic data collection is a bit like believing that DOGE was going to apply the world's most advanced statistical techniques to reducing billing fraud at Medicare and Medicaid. It was a nice idea, didn't happen, and it's hard to imagine it happening now with economic data collection. So Antoni was just until yesterday, as Donald Trump plucked him, at the Heritage Foundation, where he was a chief economist over there. And one reaction, interestingly, from someone at the American Enterprise Institute, Dave Hebert, was, I've been on several programs with him at this point and have been impressed by two things: his inability to understand basic economics and the speed with which he's gone MAGA. Now, in the conservative world, there are some people who just say, if you go full MAGA and you are an economic populist, then you don't understand basic economics. And the people who criticize him, just from my survey of the comments, appear to be pretty much libertarians whose main quibbles with him are over populism. They see him as overly populist. But if you're Joe Weisenthal, if you're on the street, you're looking at this. Stephen Moore, I don't know if you saw this, kind of poured cold water on the idea that they would pull the jobs reports. So it seems like they're trying to calm. It reminds me a little bit of the tariffs. They're trying to calm Wall Street a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look,
because you can understand if you're Joe Weisenthal and you're like, oh, you're taking this MAGA guy right off of Steve Bannon's war room, and people now have to trade off of the information that he does or does not provide.
I think it's entirely fair. And I mean, I think this is one, again, where it's about competence, showing your work, transparency, et cetera, not exactly some of the hallmarks so far of DOGE or the Trump administration. It's basically just been a slapshot approach. Like, you may take a problem, you may diagnose it correctly, but then fixing the problem, if you don't fix it correctly, then people are obviously going to still prefer the earlier one. Like, to the BLS point, with all of those major revisions under Biden and then significantly under Donald Trump, just again, at a very technical level, the sampling and the way that it was collected was outdated and ridiculous. It is entirely fair to say, okay, that's going to be done. But one of the points that Weisenthal makes is that the BLS, at the end of the day, it's not a political job, because it was just compiling data. Like, at the end of the day, what your job should be, even if you want to modernize it, if you want to change it, is one that creates and corrects sampling. You're going to have to be very transparent, right, at the economy level and at the stock market level, to make sure that everybody understands exactly how all of this is done. Taking away a monthly report was not in my opinion, the definition of modernization. We're not sure yet, right? Whether this is all going to go through. But the fact that it is, open about it is going to make people very shaky about what the next one is. And they're really going to have to go and to check their work. And the worst possible scenario is like actual politicization of changing the way that the numbers are calculated and making it so, and then, basically doing it in the way that would make it so that it's overtly political. And already there have the appearance of that. So it's actually on them to assure any, serious market analyst or whatever that that's not the case. They may get away with it, to be honest. I mean, if they actually do have some transparency, if it's the only number you can rely on, then what the hell are you supposed to do, right? But their current justification, as I understand it as well, is that if you change the way, if the job numbers had been accurate, according to the Secretary Scott Bessent, I was just saying yesterday, he's like, then the Fed would have cut rates. So part of this is also trying to put pressure on the Federal Reserve. But again, if you juke your numbers, initially to try and engineer some sort of other result, that's going to look really bad. And I'm not going to sit here in America as the greatest, data collector or any of that in the world. Trust me, we're definitely not. If you look at all the revisions for everything. But the point is more about the trust in this specific person. And then, it's not above the Trump administration to try to change things that are happening to try and engineer some sort of stock market bump or, a fall or a Fed cut or any of that. And that's where we're starting to get into very, very dicey territory.
It's dicey territory. But what's interesting about everything you just said is that it gets to how fake all of this stuff is to begin with. And that doesn't mean that in the process of fixing what you see as a bad situation, you sort of make this diagnosis. It doesn't mean that Trump can be trusted not to exploit the opportunity and the very real problem. But it does mean that doesn't mean that the problem isn't real. And this gets to, I think, a really fundamental question of policy in the Trump administration, because there's direction and there's process. And the distinction between direction and process, I think, gets lost so often in that, like, he's sometimes pointed in the right direction, and the process is flawed. And the process is sometimes worse than actually trying to approach the problem. Like,
well, we're going to talk about this with D.C. I think it's a perfect example.
100%.
Right? Where it's like you could take a problem of crime in Washington, D.C., and then you could say, okay, well, we're going to deploy the federal troops or whatever. And you're like, okay, what are you going to do? And it's like, and now there are videos coming out of, FBI agents and HSI agents in the cleanest and nicest parts of Washington, D.C., Emily, which you and I have spent time in, and any Washington, D.C., it'd be like we're going to clean up crime in New York, and then having the troops like strolling around like the Upper East Side. People are like, what? Like, what are we doing here? It's like, get out of here, bro. Like, there's nothing going on, unless it's for journalists and for cameras and all of that. And their theory would be like a grand show of force. And those of us who live here are like, what are you even talking about? It's like we don't have any issues here.
It's exactly the same situation.
It's exactly the same. Same in L.A. I would say, right? The same type of thing. In
deportation in general.
Deportations. Going
DOGE.
for the show. Yeah, DOGE, same thing. Going for the show, not actually being serious. Just by the way, if anybody's interested, our deficit payments significantly went up, outpacing all tariff revenue and everything by over 90%. Just in case anybody's interested in any of those numbers, the actual numbers. Let's go ahead and put A4 up on the screen, please. This is to the inflation numbers that you were talking about. And overall, I mean, this is a number that the Trump administration is very happy about. But there are some serious warning signs inside of it. So they say inflation held steady at 2.7% in July. Prices, excluding food and energy categories, rose some 3.1% over the last 12 months, above forecast. So slightly above target, but 2.7 unchanged from June's gain, below the 2.8 rise that was expected from the economists surveyed by the Wall Street Journal. But the core inflation numbers, when you start to actually dig into it, they start to get, a little problematic. And this is, I've talked about this before, about why trying to put it all in a single number is a problem, because it ignores, it'd be like GDP numbers. It'd be like, well, GDP went up. I'm like, well, what about home prices and your ability to afford one? Which is going to impact you more? It's the same, actually, when you look at what categories are driving inflation or not. So let's put this up there, please. This is A6, which has the individual goods where you can see where you've had significant reduction. So eggs, yeah, great. Eggs are actually down by some 43%. 2% in terms of annualized gain, along with, quote, non-frozen, non-carbonated juices, some 5.2%. I don't even know what that is.
Critical category.
Butter, snacks, rice, pasta, cornmeal, lunch meats, baby food, cheese, and related products. All of those have gone down, not significantly, except for eggs. But the places where we have seen an increase are at the very top. You can see coffee. What's interesting about the coffee number, I dug into this, is a lot of it is because of these tariffs on Brazil as a result of the Bolsonaro stuff, right? So some 50% tariff there. Brazil is a significant exporter of mass market coffee here in the United States, but broadly also just the general trade imbalance for a lot of the other countries that ship coffee to America. The disruption in supply chain has pushed it high, as well as there's apparently been some bad weather down in Brazil and in Latin America that killed the crop. So those two things together have spiked the cost of coffee to some 25%. That's one of those things you could easily notice because obviously, I think the vast majority of Americans drink coffee every single day. Beef and veal remain some up 15%. Cookies, peanut butter, canned vegetables, canned fruit, all of them are over 10%. Ice cream, dried beans, fresh vegetables, significantly, again, up over 8%. So a decent number of categories there of everyday items which Americans are buying and getting some sticker shock, coffee being the most noteworthy one. It all comes together, in that 3.1% number, but it remains important, just to look at exactly where things are. Put A5, please, on the screen as well. This is kind of gets to something we're about to talk about in a little bit, but the U.S. has also hit the highest layoffs right now since COVID. So in July, there were some 62,000 job cuts announced, and that's a 29% jump from June, 140% higher than in July of 2024. Now, as you can see, a huge part of that is by the government and from DOGE now specifically. The reason why, and I've said this to some people's shock before, a lot of people don't know, the U.S. government is the largest employer in the United States of America. And so if you trim, even a little bit, well, then you're going to end up in that scenario where you have a major number of layoffs, and you're also going to have all of these different layoffs in other categories that continue to hit. Technology's having a problem. Retail, that number is very interesting. I did some research, not fully, ready. Anyone in the industry is not ready to say it's all because of tariffs. There's like other downstream problems, inflation, consumer spending, services, and warehousing. But the problem is it's up everywhere and significantly up amongst the government. So overall, it's kind of a shaky situation right now. It really is precarious. And the tariffs are one where, yes, overall the tariff rate remains high, but it's targeted at its most insane levels at only a few countries, which is going to lead to those wonky outcomes. So Brazil is the perfect example. That's how we have the 25% coffee bump. The other most tariffed country right now by the United States is India. So there's going to be potential problems in the future on generic pharmaceuticals. It could change the oil business. I'm trying to think of the third most tariffed country. I forget.
You
right
just
off the
Rick
top
Perry.
of my head. Yeah, I did just Rick Perry it. But China, our number one trading partner, there's been a suspension and a broad bring down of tariffs because they keep getting exemptions, and lo and behold, just yesterday, Trump announced another 90-day pause.
Yeah.
So we're going to be coming up on 270 days, basically, of pauses on tariffs with China, which is really the entire ballgame. So that's part of the reason why the Trump administration can say, see, our tariffs are working, when it's like, dude, you don't even have real tariffs on. Like the original tariffs you announced, you took them all away. You can't say that it worked.
Well, there's still the 10% baseline's still there, right?
10% baseline, but that's not the 130% which was announced. That's not the the major changes or any of that was there. So yeah, of course things are where they are. And then finally, the last thing I've heard from them is, well, what about the stock market? I'm like, well, Nvidia alone is 8% of the entire S&P 500.
So what?
And a huge part of the S&P 500 is driven by tech stocks, which are generally not as impacted by tariffs. That's not where I would look. I would look at manufacturing employment and the deficit numbers, as well as U.S. CapEx, like in terms of domestic investment. All three of those are down from what I was looking at just yesterday. So look, it's not the disaster scenario, but it's not the great success scenario.
Yes, but I was going to say, I was talking to Republicans on Capitol Hill about a week before they left for recess. And I think I mentioned this on the show before, but I was telling them, if you look at this, I think it was a Quinnipiac poll from last month that found Trump underwater on the economy, immigration, foreign policy. So 3 signature Trump issues. And on the economy, I asked them, basically, like, what do you think that says if Donald Trump is underwater on the economy? And they said, well, this is why we passed the one big beautiful bill when we did, because We now expect, heading into the midterms, that these economic changes are going to trickle towards the consumer. I don't think anyone actually used that word, I'm paraphrasing, but are going to trickle into different states, different communities, and people will start feeling the effects of both the tariffs and the Big Beautiful Bill in a good way, because they always saw the Big Beautiful Bill as the necessary part 2 of the tariff agenda. Basically, like they didn't believe that you could just keep doing the tariffs if the bill didn't pass. And that's an impossible hypothetical to revisit now. But basically, that bill had all of what they would not describe, but are accurately described as sort of industrial policy decisions that are aimed at bringing jobs back. So exemption write-offs for retroactive to January for things like manufacturing and building and all of that. So Saagar, right now, they're in the middle of their own experiment. And they don't have any control over the president, who is using tariffs as a foreign policy tool in addition to an economic tool. And so that just leaves what's been there from the beginning, uncertainty. And with the uncertainty brings leverage, of course, and that's why you end up getting the EU to the table at a deal. It's how you end up getting Keir Starmer to the table on a deal, whatever else. But it's also how you end up with 90-day pauses recurring in the China case.
90-day pauses. And I would say again on these deals, and this is the other thing that drives me crazy, you know, some sort of deal is not necessarily good if they're fake. So the $600 billion pledge from the European Union is complete bullshit. I mean, if you look at the European Union's own announcement, they were like, yeah, we actually have no ability to compel, you know, our companies to do this, but we'll pledge it, I guess, right? You know, same with the Japanese. They were shown, you know, some of the releases, and they were like, well, that's not what we promised at all. And also, at a certain point, you know, some of these numbers all just become fake, like 400 billion, 500 billion. It's all about an execution. There's a reason, just so everybody understands. I said this before. My wife worked in trade policy. These trade deals used to take years to put together. Now, that's an indictment of the process, but part of the problem, part of the reason why they took years was because they would pass Congress and they would also pass legislature in wherever their home country was. And it became a legally binding agreement between these two countries with an arbitration process where if you violate said process, then you're gonna have to pay a fine, or we're gonna have some, you know, dispute court or whatever. I'm not defending those previous ones because I think a lot of those were bad deals, but I'm just saying at a very process level, you're not supposed to just sign some handshake agreement. It has no enforceability, right? So whoever comes into office after Trump can do to his deal exactly what Trump did to the Iran deal. This was part of the problem with the Iran deal. They never really passed through Congress, right? So the JCPOA can just be ripped up by any executive. You're not supposed to really do stuff this way, especially with the U.S. economy and with business, because we now just have uncertainty for the next 3.5 years. We have uncertainty basically forever. Like whoever becomes the president, they get to do this whatever they want. Last thing before we move on, I am told though that as this moves up to the Supreme Court, that they are on very dicey territory. A couple of conservative court watchers have said that the court looks very skeptical, at least now so far, on the way the Trump administration will handle some of these tariffs. The Trump administration is trying to buckle it all under the purview of foreign policy, but they don't think it's going to pass legal scrutiny.
Emergency measures. And the same thing, we'll talk about this in the D block, or the DC block as well. But that's another huge variable factoring into the uncertainty, because now you have to take into consideration when you're pricing the markets how the Supreme Court potentially will react in a decision like that. So the more the uncertainty goes on, obviously the more we're likely to start seeing some of these, like egg prices will go down, but coffee prices will jump, these spotty indicators in reports, if we get reports. If we start getting, if we continue to get the data.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.